Lieutenant Holloway ascended to 32,000 feet and out of the pea soup he had previously been flying through. The dense clouds seemed to have arrived suddenly and enveloped his squadron in a matter of seconds. The vaporous ceiling lay like a carpet beneath him, blanketing the sky to the horizon. He'd never experienced anything quite like it, and he'd been a pilot since he was 18. But he didn't have time to sit back and appreciate the atmospheric anomaly. His squadron was missing. When the clouds rolled in at 26,000 feet, he lost sight of Sanford's squadron almost immediately. He tried to reach them and anyone in his fighter group, but with each attempt, comms only fizzled with static. He felt certain that he would rejoin his squadron once the clouds thinned and visibility returned, but it never did. After 15 tension-filled minutes, he finally made the decision to climb. Surely others had done the same, he reasoned. But no one had. He didn't know what the right course of action to take was. He was in uncharted waters. He'd never become separated from a squadron before. Protocol dictated that in the event of separation, he returned to the nearest friendly base if communications or contact couldn't be restored, but he had descended at a conservative rate of 1,200 feet per minute for nearly 10 minutes and never saw the ground. Thick clouds pressed on him from all sides for the duration, with seemingly no end of dissipating, so he decided to return to his previous position. He checked the fuel gauge. His brows dipped in confusion. He should have had nearly 3/4 of a tank left, but the gauge claimed that he had just over a quarter. If that were accurate, at his current airspeed, he would be out of fuel within the hour. He shook his head. Typically, fighters were equipped with ample fuel to accommodate mission parameters, with extra fuel factored in for maneuvering in other combat scenarios. But Lieutenant Holloway had engaged in no such maneuvers, evasive or otherwise. By his account, he should have plenty of fuel left, but he didn't. It wasn't typically his way to entertain far-fetched theories that tread the waters of the supernatural. To him, most things could be reasonably explained, even if the explanation teetered on the outlandish. But he was a proponent of Occam's razor, the assumptive principle that, given competing theories to a problem, the simplest explanation is likely the answer. Though he was low on fuel, he saw no precipitous decline from the fuel gauge, and the oil and fuel pressure gauge had remained steady at 45 psi, which was well within range. He smelled no fuel in the cockpit and saw no fuel leaking from the plane from his limited vantage point. By all indicators, the aircraft was intact. So where did all the fuel go? Lieutenant Holloway peered out the window and below him. Something was unnatural about the clouds. From the way they formed, to their density, to their insistence on remaining, something swirling in their vapor was irregular and a detriment to his aircraft. Something that caused his plane to work harder or drained it of fuel excessively. He didn't know how. He couldn't offer a valid logical theory. However, numerous factors pointed to the clouds as the likely culprits. All he knew at this point was that he felt he needed to stay out of them. On the horizon, something glinted in the sunlight. It was a brilliant splash of white against the blue sky, impossible to miss. Lieutenant Holloway's breathing slowed and he smiled to himself, probably the sun's reflection off the fuselages of his squadron. He increased his speed in an attempt to catch up, but as he throttled up, the ball of light grew disproportionately larger. He frowned. Was his squadron heading toward his position, possibly searching for him? He adjusted his fingers on the control stick and narrowed his eyes. The ball of light increased in size at an alarming rate, yet he saw no sign of his squadron. What is this? He thought to himself. Then, in a flash, the light was outside the canopy, roughly 50 yards away on the port side. Lieutenant Holloway stared at it in disbelief, his heart racing. How had it covered so much distance in what amounted to a fraction of a second? It defied the laws of known physics. He gazed at it incredulously. It was a perfect sphere of light surrounded by a semi-translucent, undulating aura. It was spectacular. But what really sent his blood pressure soaring was its position. Utilizing all the tools of observation available to him, he concluded, however unbelievably, that the light appeared to travel at the exact same airspeed and relative position as the aircraft. Lieutenant Holloway looked for signs of drift in all axes, but the sphere maintained a locked position, almost as if it were tethered to the aircraft. Then, just as suddenly as the sphere had arrived, it changed position to just overhead. Lieutenant Holloway craned his neck to look at the sphere, which now hovered directly over him. Again, it moved perfectly in tandem with the aircraft, even as he executed a brief right turn to test its accuracy in maintaining position. Then it moved again. This time Lieutenant Holloway lost sight of it. He peered out both sides of the canopy, searching high and low for the sphere of light, but it wasn't until he wrenched around as far as the harness would allow that he caught a glimpse of it hovering off the starboard side of the aircraft near the tail. Lieutenant Holloway didn't know what to make of it. What was this thing, he thought, and what was it doing? Was it a new weapon or a new means of surveillance? Was he being evaluated? Reconned? Or was this thing, as his instincts led him to believe, something else entirely? Occam's razor. The engine sputtered, then died. Lieutenant Holloway snapped his head forward. He focused on the instrument panel and had just begun to run the restart procedure in his mind when the aircraft lost all power. A second later, and all instrument gauges flatlined to their pre-flight positions. Lieutenant Holloway attempted to re-engage the primer and press the starter switch, but nothing happened. The aircraft was dead. He took the control stick in both hands. Through the canopy, he saw the orb flash from the tail to his 2 o'clock in a heartbeat. It hovered for only a moment, then disappeared. Lieutenant Holloway had to tear himself away from the unbelievable sight to focus on his situation. He was going down. The aircraft started to descend. It punctured the surface of the cloud layer, immersing Lieutenant Holloway in dense mist. The nose of the aircraft began to pitch forward, much more than should have been typical for a stalled aircraft at his speed. He pulled on the control stick to correct it, but it was unresponsive. A dead stick, as they say. He tried the restart procedure again, but the instrument panel only mocked him with apathetic indifference. Lieutenant Holloway mentally prepared himself for a bailout. He would wait for as long as he could before abandoning the aircraft. He didn't know whether he was over land or water, so it felt prudent to wait until he could make a determination. And if clouds and fog extend all the way to the ground? A voice in the back of his mind asked. The aircraft accelerated, its nose tipping even further forward and ignoring the basic principles of flight. He yanked on the control stick to no avail, then relinquished control to fate. There was nothing more he could do. The aircraft plummeted through the clouds. Lieutenant Holloway had no idea how fast he was falling, but he was certain he was approaching, if not already surpassing, the 450-mile-per-hour limit of the aircraft. If he fell any faster, he feared the plane might break apart. He had no sense of his airspeed, but felt the ground must be rising up to meet him in a hurry. A bailout was impossible now. He was traveling far too fast to make a safe exit from the cockpit. He came to accept that his fate was sealed. Then the clouds thinned. A few moments later they dissipated altogether, providing Lieutenant Holloway with an unobstructed view of the ground. He was over land. More specifically, he was over familiar territory. He immediately recognized navigational landmarks and knew the airfield was nearby. But how could that be, he thought? He had been flying in one direction since takeoff. By any calculations, he should be far away from here. The aircraft engine suddenly restarted, startling Lieutenant Holloway. The instrument panel sprang to life, needles and gauges dancing in their respective displays until they settled. He grabbed the control stick and took control of the aircraft, easing out of the dive and slowing his descent. The airfield materialized on the near horizon. Lieutenant Holloway breathed a sigh of indescribable relief, then set his course for the airfield. When he landed, he was met with a hero's welcome. Emergency vehicles prowled the boundaries of the tarmac, and he counted no less than several dozen servicemen charging from nearby buildings to greet him as he rolled to a stop. After he exited the aircraft, his friend, Thomas, was first to push through the crowd up to him. "You're alive!" Thomas cried gleefully. "So it appears," Lieutenant Holloway said with a wry smile. He glanced over the bustling crowd, all of whom clamored to get a look at him. "Didn't realize getting lost was so entertaining. What happened? We win the war or something while I was gone?" Thomas stared at Lieutenant Holloway in disbelief. He couldn't tell if he was serious. "Win the war?" he said. "Lieutenant, we thought you were dead." Lieutenant Holloway recoiled. "Dead? I just got separated from Sanford. Thickest clouds I've ever seen rolled in. Visibility was non-existent." The crowd quieted to murmurs of confusion. Thomas looked around, then stepped closer to his friend. "Lieutenant, Sanford Squadron already returned to base 3 days ago." Lieutenant Holloway stood up straight, his smile dissolving. "What?" Thomas saw the incomprehension in his friend's eyes. He nodded and said, "Yeah, that's the thing of it. We thought you were dead because you've been gone for 3 days." Lieutenant Holloway stared into space, the reality sinking in. He stepped away from Thomas in the aircraft and stared at the ground, trying to process what he had just been told. Then, as he came to terms with the situation, he let his eyes drift toward the sky and the blanket of clouds that receded into the distance.